a Hello, welcome to Walk in the Park. My name is Tony Ingram, your host, and this is our first episode of the year 2020, episode 230. So if you want to see all of my shows, all my episodes, or most all of them, you can go to my website. It's walkinthepark.tv. Walkinthepark.tv. That is a URL. That is a web address. So this week we're going to go to Skaneateles Lake. We're going to look at it from various perspectives. One of the eastern Finger Lakes. There's the Finger Lakes laying out across central New York, south of Lake Ontario, because we're in Ithaca, New York. And so that would be two lakes to our east, and it's marked on the Google map here. Let's zoom in a little bit more. There it is. So to our east is Owasco Lake and then Skaneateles Lake, and it's southwest of the city of Syracuse, as you can see there. So let's look at the watersheds. So most of the Finger Lakes flow into, well, all the Finger Lakes actually flow into Lake Ontario, and all but four small western lakes flow into the Seneca River, which runs from west to east and then turns north into the Oswego River into Lake Ontario. And there it shows you in this watershed map where Skaneateles Lake is, and the lake, this easternmost lake is Otisco Lake. So let's look at the lake here again. And see, might get some statistics on it here. We can get what it is. Yeah, okay. So you can see that most of the watershed here around these lakes, but particularly Skaneateles Lake we're looking at now, is in agriculture. The darker green areas are forest, but the lighter green, almost yellowish areas, those are farmland. So here's an incredible view from the south end. This photographed by Matt Champlin, who was very generous to allow me to use this photograph. He also loans a lot of photographs to the Finger Lakes Land Trust, and we'll be talking about them. Okay, so I wrote that Skaneateles is said to be the cleanest of the Finger Lakes and is the primary water supply for the city of Syracuse, as well as communities around the lake itself. So we're looking from the south here, so this is the area that's most forested. And let's see, we'll go to the next picture here. The lake was carved into the northern edge of the Allegheny Plateau by Ice Age glaciers, like all the lakes were, and all the Finger Lakes were. And the lake extends into the Lake Ontario lowland at its northern end, as do all the lakes. The shores of the lake in the south are steep and less developed. So you can see how steep that is, and that's that scarp on the left there, just south, just south of the lake, is really steep. And there are cliffs along the lakes too, as you will see. So, so now we're going to take a look at compare some watershed maps. So here's the watershed of Skaneateles Lake. Now, what's a watershed? A watershed is all the land that drains to a body of water or to a river. And this is it for Skaneateles Lake. And you can see the lighter areas there are agricultural areas, and then the darker areas are forest areas of various sorts. So let's compare it to Cayuga Lake's watershed. Look how much larger a watershed is. Now the scale of these maps is different as well, but the proportions of the watershed to the lake much larger in Cayuga Lake. So it's very small watershed for Skaneateles Lake, but Cayuga Lake is about 5 times as big as Skaneateles. Let me see if I have that. Well, we'll get to a point where we have some statistics on the lake here. So this is up near the northern end, showing some of the farmland, and that the lake is pretty level. The lakeshore is not very high there. There are some, although the lake is one of the cleanest lakes in New York, one of the cleanest of the Finger Lakes. There are some issues with all of this agricultural land and lakeshore cottages and the like, development along the lakeshore that do have inputs into the lake. And so there is a management plan that's being worked on for the lake, as well as Owasco Lake, to try to manage some of these inputs and make some of them mandatory. Perhaps there are some voluntary best management practices and so forth for farmers that have been established for a while, but maybe more needs to be done, because we're starting to have problems like this that most of the Finger Lakes have, and many lakes in New York have been having lately. This is harmful algal bacteria, or mostly blue-green algae, and it is has been found in the lake in recent summers, and as well as the other Finger Lakes. Like I said, it's a serious concern for public health and safety of water supplies in the region. Like I said, that the city of Syracuse gets most of its water from Skaneateles Lake. So it's not as bad. It's not as bad as Cayuga Lake. Cayuga Lake is the worst, one of the worst lakes in the state for harmful algal bacteria. So these are issues that are relatively new. Well, they're not so new. They've been around for a while, but they've gotten bad in recent years, and there's a lot of study going on that. So let's take a look at the this DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation map. Talk about some of the vital statistics of the lake. First of all, its elevation is 863 feet above sea level, and that's more than twice as high above sea level as Cayuga Lake, which is about, I don't know, 380 feet, something like that, just under 400 feet. And 8,960 acres. The shoreline length is 34 miles. The length of the lake itself is 16 miles, compared to Cayuga Lakes, which is 38 miles. So the width is 1.5 miles. That's the greatest width, probably. And the maximum depth is 300 feet, and the mean depth is 145 feet. So that's kind of the parameters of the lake here. Now, there's not much public access. Like many of the Finger Lakes, there's just not much public access to big parks or that sort of thing. But there are some. There's some places, and there's some up in the city of Skaneateles at the northern end. And this DEC picture here shows a boat launch a couple of miles south along the west shore of the lake. Is a boat launch, mainly for fishermen, but for any kind of boating. We'll talk a little bit about fishing. Let's see. And this is a quote from DEC website. Smallmouth bass fishing is good throughout the lake. The south end is noted for good bullhead, panfish, and pickerel fishing. Lake trout fishing is excellent, though fish are smaller than in other Finger Lakes. Many rainbow trout and Atlantic salmon are caught by trolling on the surface during spring and fall. There's also excellent fall and winter rainbow trout shore fishing. And in the shallow ends of the lake, you can do this, ice fishing, like the other Finger Lakes, pretty much. See. So what else I got coming up here for you here? So we're going to go, now we're going to go to the northern end of the lake. Let's go back to look at where the lake is again. And there's the village of Skaneateles at the northern end. We'll zoom in here. Looking straight down on the northern end of the lake. And you can see there's a long pier that comes out. And then there's the Skaneateles Creek, I think it is, it's called. That is the outlet of the lake that takes the water up to the Seneca River and eventually Lake Ontario and St. Lawrence River years later. And zoom farther down, you can see there's this white dock or pier, and that's what's going to be of most interest to us. There's a little park there called Clift Park, and let's see, that's called Clift Park that it's in. There's about 3 little parks along the lake there. So let's take a look. We're gonna, to the left there's that long pier, and then this is the dock that we're going to look at, and at that dock, these boats dock there. This is 2 boats owned by the Mid Lakes Navigation Company, which also runs a lot of boats on the Erie Canal. And the boat on the left here is their mail boat. I think it's called the Barbara S. Wiles boat, and it's the mail boat, and it goes down the lake. It's been doing this for years. I did it years and years ago. Oh gosh, 30-some years ago, I think. And it goes to about 25 different locations farther down the lake where the shores are very steep, and delivers mail to cottages that are basically only accessible by the water, more or less. And but we're gonna take a trip actually on this boat called the Judge Ben Wiles, and that's a much larger boat, obviously. And there are dinner cruises and tour excursions that go out for a couple hours. So that's what we're going to do. Let me see if I've got anything to say about that. Yeah. Judge Ben Wiles boat. Okay. So we're going to take a trip out. Didn't have anything special to say about that. Let's take a trip on the lake. I got a video here, just a few minutes. I took this video years ago, and let's take a look at it, see what we've got here. Take a trip on Skaneateles Lake, coming right up. Okay.
Miles long, and you can see Glen Haven, some of the towns, some of the buildings in Glen Haven that are on the eastern shore. If you look down there, some of those white buildings in the sunlight, and that is where Glen Haven is located. So it's about 7 miles from here, or 6 miles from 10 Mile Point. 10 Mile Point is where Lord's Camp is located today. Lord's Camp, 10 Mile Point, before it was Lord's Camp, was owned by the city of Syracuse and used as a recreation stop for steamboat passengers. Matter of fact, up until 1877, when the steamers, the city of Syracuse and Glen Haven stopped running, 10 Mile Point was the most.
Okay, so that's the give a little taste of the experience you'd have if you take the Judge Ben Wiles tour boat out of Skaneateles. Once again, this is Walk in the Park, walkinthepark.tv to see my schedule, the full schedule of cable casts, and you can also watch it online as well as many other episodes. Okay, so now we're going to go down to the south end of the lake. Here's a Finger Lakes Land Trust map showing many of the properties and projects in the south end of Skaneateles Lake and the adjacent lakes. We'll zoom in a little bit more here. Now, well, I'll read a little bit from their website. Regarded as perhaps the most pristine of the Finger Lakes, Skaneateles Lake is well known for its clear waters. The wooded hills that embrace the south end of the lake create a scene that is more reminiscent of the Adirondacks than some of the other Finger Lakes. To ensure the future of this gem, the Land Trust is working with a variety of partners to create a green belt that will circle the southern half of the lake, from the fossil-rich Staghorn Cliffs on the east side to Carpenter's Falls on the west. Resources in this area include the extensive wetlands of Bear Swamp, pristine streams, an Audubon important bird area, steeply sloping woodlands, and miles of recreational trails. So the Land Trust is doing a lot to create some public access to at least the lands around the lake and a little bit of the lake itself. So, but protect the lands that are so important to the watershed and to the wildlife and to the ecology, and also to our enjoyment of it. So we're going to now zoom in on some of the preserves here. So that's says Hinchcliffe Family Preserve, and I went there a couple of years ago. Zooming down onto the southeast flanks of the lake here, and there you can see a gorge that goes from the upper right down to the lake. The Hinchcliffe Preserve is the southern side, the below side of that, but it doesn't actually have lake frontage. So here we go. We'll use some of their maps to locate it. Zooming in, there it's showing the boundaries. So you can see it's up above the lake itself. So it doesn't have lake access, but there is that's in the works eventually for some of the Land Trust projects, I believe, to create better lake access. In any case, this is a wonderful place to go. There's trails. There's also another preserve off to the east that trail you see going off to the right there on the other side of Route 41 can take you to. And then here is another map showing the preserve snaking up around that Randall Gulf. So let's see if I have anything to say with this particular map here. No. Okay, so let's look at it from the air. It's another Bill Hecht picture here. There's that Randall Gulf that comes down. Then you can see the farmlands above, and some of that that cleared land is in the preserve, and then most of that forested hillside to the right of the Gulf in the lower right part of the picture is in the Hinchcliffe Preserve. And then here is a Bill Hecht photograph looking north over the preserve, and I'm going to show you now a video of a short that I took near the preserve and on Route 41, some views, and then going into the preserve itself. Let's see what we can get here. Coming right up. So you can see the south end of the lake is really very steep and wooded. And some areas of it don't even have roads along the shore. They're just too steep. So we're going to take a look at another video that was produced by the Land Trust. They've given me permission to show you. And first we'll say a little bit about the preserve that was in the Land Trust materials. The 206-acre Hinchcliffe Family Preserve peers over the eastern shore of Skaneateles Lake, offering impressive vistas, diverse habitats, and a unique window onto the human history and changing natural landscape of the property. The Hinchcliffe Preserve is a key part of a growing green belt of preserved land around the southern end of Skaneateles Lake. Land protection here and throughout the watershed is vitally important because the lake serves as the source of drinking water for the city of Syracuse and several other communities. So we're going to take a look at an aerial photography here done by Bill Hecht that will give you another beautiful perspective on this preserve in the southeast corner of Skaneateles Lake. And make sure I've got that right one coming up here. I think I do. Oh. The Land Trust does a beautiful job with some of their media, but they're mostly doing an incredible job with saving land. And over the last, 30 years or so, they've been doing this. And so let's take a look at another view of the area where the Hinchcliffe Preserve is, to the right of the gully there, of the gorge. To the left of it, you look down along the shore and you can see some cliffs. And those are called the Staghorn Cliffs, named after a kind of fossil coral, which is a very unusual coral. I meant to include a photograph of it, and I didn't. But anyway, all along these cliffs, these corals are found because this was once an ancient sea. The rocks here were once an ancient sea, nearly 400 million years ago, and there was a particular bed of corals of this particular kind that is very, very interesting and prominent. Here's a look at it from across the lake. You can just see the cliffs over there. And then here's an aerial photograph by one by Matt Champlin of the Staghorn Cliffs. Now the Staghorn Cliffs, to the actually you go up here, the Land Trust has some of the cliff area. The area to the right of the the preserve there, of course, is the Hinchcliffe. The part that we're seeing here on the left here is not part of the preserve yet, and then farther along the shore would be off the picture to the left here. There is some that the Land Trust has gotten created a preserve a number of years ago. So we'll go take a look at that one, the Dickinson Conservation Area here. Let's see what I can tell you about that. Here we go. The Cora Camp Dickinson Conservation Area protects 1,350 feet of shoreline and high bluffs that are locally known as Staghorn Cliffs. Access to the preserve is currently by boat only, with no safe access to the upland forest portion of the preserve. So there really isn't a map that you can use for that. It took me a while to figure out just exactly where it is. but they have preserved some of the cliff area, and maybe they'll be able to preserve some more. So let's take a look at a short little video that the Land Trust did on the Staghorn Cliffs. Let's see, that will be, yes, coming right up here. Coming right. Okay, that's all we have time for today. There are other land trust properties in the area, the Bahar Preserve with Carpenter Falls and so forth, which I actually featured in another episode, which you can look on my website and find out about it. That's Carpenter Falls. But I've got to say goodbye here, so let me get my goodbye image here of Matt Champlin's picture of the lake. And let's see if we can do my final goodbye video here that we do all the time. Go and see you soon. Is a